Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TF podcast, where we talk about tech, finance, Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto, and everything in between. I'm excited for my next guest, Raymond Walintukan. He is with Bitmain. You might have heard of them, only the largest Bitcoin mining operation, and he is their director of mining operations. So with that, Raymond, please introduce yourself.
Hi, well, thank you very much for having me, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be part of your podcast, and any part of your community has been great and very supportive of us. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
And also want to make a quick correction. So we are the largest manufacturer of mining equipment, and possibly one of the largest AI research developments for blockchain as well. So.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Well, thanks for that correction. Yeah. Well, Raymond, yeah, we've had the chance to meet. You've been at our conferences before, and so, and you're actually, we're in the same state. You're over on in Eastern Washington, right?
Central Washington,
Or
yeah.
Central Washington.
About 2.5 hours from you.
Yeah. Nice. Because there's some mining operations over there.
That's right. So, originally our flagship was started in Central Washington, and then we've been expanding across North America quite rapidly, with more expansion actually coming up on the horizon, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later. So,
yeah, nice. Well, actually, let's just go right into that. So, where's the majority, or I guess where are the different facilities? Central Washington. I know you have the largest in Texas, or the largest in the U.S. is in Texas, right? Round Rock, is that right?
Close to there. But I mean, basically, it's a rock skip away from Austin. But we have stuff there, and as well as in Tennessee as well. When we give the grand opening, then I think it'll be pretty easier for people to understand. But we are looking at multiple sites all over North America, and we've been expanding quite rapidly. So there's more to come for sure.
Nice. When you think of sites, I'm assuming it has to do with electrical cost, or how does that usually factor into where you're deciding where to put a site up?
Exactly. I mean, it's a very similar process as data centers are picked. They drop a quadrant with risk factors such as environmental, political, and the electrical price. And the places that we've picked are typically in the lowest risk category. So Central Washington, for example, we have very little risk, for earthquakes, flooding, things like that, which a numerous number of other data centers have also popped up in the same area. So we're not certainly not alone in this, and it's actually good if we band together, because that way, the community understands that the value that these mining centers or data centers bring to them. New jobs, high-tech jobs, high-paying jobs that you may or may not find in an area that's very rural. So,
Yeah.
So like that. So definitely coming back to it, looking for the optimal places, electrical costs. That's big. Typically, if we can go as green as possible, a majority of our sites are powered by hydro, which is great because that's green energy. It's sustainable. What's big right now is a lot of natural gas. I'm seeing a lot of development of people investing in places such as Canada and Oklahoma. Quite a bit of offset from the fracking. Now, with the oil industry cutting their output, we'll see what happens. But you can get very cheap electrical rates, from natural gas offshoots, because that energy is being wasted.
Yeah.
And so they're willing to, ask for very little money, but the infrastructure costs will be higher in those type of areas.
Oh, got it. Why is that? Why would the infrastructure be higher in those areas?
Well, I mean, for example, natural gas to electricity generators don't exist in some of these areas, right? And so they have to be built up. Whereas if we go into an existing grid, we tap into, let's say, the hydro plant, that's already built out. So, I mean, the cost to build the infrastructure from the whatever hydro plant grid, the local upstation, downstation is cheaper than building your own facility in the middle of nowhere.
That makes sense. So I guess that's probably where like the political factors come in a little bit too, right? Like perhaps if like a government or an area provides some level of incentive to do so, or because I guess you're right. Like why? Because I'm trying to think is like, I wouldn't want to build a power plant essentially to then be able to mine. But I guess if it's cheap enough, you figure out that calculation to see if it makes sense.
Right. And you know, so to give some very brief numbers, I mean, people could build, and the cost, the measurement that they use is cost per megawatt. So let's say you have a small facility. Let's say it's a 2 megawatt facility. You know, what does it cost for you to build that out, and then you amortize that over the time, of course, of whatever you purchase, whatever you're expecting to run this operation. So the cost will run. I mean, you can do, you know, a kind of an amateur situation, $100,000 a megawatt.
Mhm.
100,000 to $1 million a megawatt. Data centers run on the upper echelon of that price, and then so blockchain data centers, you know, differ in that, and they have different requirements. And so you could, you know, the where you save costs, you might end up spending more on others. But ultimately, the real cost, besides the ongoing electrical costs, is the cost per the equipment. And then we can go into that a little bit later, of course, too.
Got it.
Yeah.
Just like what, amortizing it, treating it like a depreciating asset type of thing.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, machines can run between, you know, 2 and 5 years. You know, before, depending on how well you take care of them, the amount of dust, the amount of heat, the amount of humidity will affect how long the longevity of your servers, these mining servers.
Hmm.
So, you know, typical depreciation, I would, you know, you'd probably want to amortize it, guess 2 years. Plus, with any hash rate difficulty increases, I mean, the effectiveness of your server is going to go down as well.
Got it.
You know, it's an arms race, right? So essentially, but it's an exciting arms race,
Yeah,
especially for
yeah,
us.
totally. I want to touch more on that, but before we do, because we were talking about the energy side, I figure we should just dive into that part real quick.
Sure. No,
There's
no.
this common assumption that Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment, or it takes up too much energy, right? And there's just a lot of energy consumption when it comes to Bitcoin mining. However, there's a lot of like you're saying, unused energy that in fact gets used for mining, right? So whether that be hydro that wasn't going to get used, or the natural gas. Can you touch a little bit on that? Like, is it really is it as bad as it's made out to be? Is it better than it's made out to be? Because to my understanding, a lot of what's being used for mining would have just essentially been electricity that would have gone away or not been used.
Right, exactly. So, for example, the natural gas situation, that natural gas is being escaped or burned into the air, you know, without being used. And so, and also with high megawatt capacity plants. For example, the way a hydro plant works is, you know, the rate of water flow will affect these. Um, they like to run on what's called, well, what we call is a balanced load.
Hey,
And
Raymond.
yeah,
Hey, sorry, one second. I had a technical difficulty over here. If
sure.
you could just say that one part over again. Sorry about that. When it came to, we were talking about the energy consumption, and like um, why it is unused, and like that it's actually really probably not as bad as people make it out to be.
Right. Okay. So very simple. The easiest example is natural gas. When natural gas is burned, that or when fracking occurs, or any type of oil that is removed from the earth in, say, central of the United States, there's an offset of natural gas that is given off. I'm not a natural gas expert, but I know that they pump a certain chemical into the ground, and then the natural gas comes out as a byproduct of it, and that is escaping. That essentially, that's the part that is wasted. And so if that's not used up, you know, that's kind of a waste. And then on the other side, I mean, if you look at power plants currently, um, they run best when the load is stable. And unfortunately, human populations do not run electricity very stable like a server farm. You know, people turn on the lights, you know, when it's nighttime, but they don't turn off through the day. You know, they turn on heaters when it's cold, but not when it's hot. And so you have this peak and valley issue with electrical power plants. And so some of our sites and some of sites for other people as well, uh, they will run off of the the disparity between what a balance load is and a valley is. So, for example, if there's a peak, perhaps the mining site will cut back on its electricity. And when there's a valley, perhaps the mining site will turn on all of its electricity. And what this does is it helps balance the load for the electrical site. So, the hydro plant, for example, the electricity is generated based on the flow of water. When you have too much flow of water, what they'll typically do is bring a generator out of the water in order to reduce the amount of water capacity that's going through, or to close a gate or raise the water level or whatnot. But sites like ours that does use a high generation of electricity, high use of electricity, can help balance that. And actually, that's good for the environment, good for the the equipment. So the equipment doesn't have to be replaced so rapidly. So the way I see it, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
They win, we get to win, and we get to use electricity for cheap. We also bring a lot to the community with jobs, a lot of tax revenues. We've raised the property taxes from quite a bit in the area, which brings more wealth to an area. So same idea. If there was a manufacturing plant brought to a small town, well, that's exactly what we are. We're manufacturing, and we're also a bank at the same time of virtual currency. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that's a coordinated effort with the energy companies, right? When
yeah,
you're talking about the on and off, or basically increasing or decreasing the throughput.
right. And we're just going through. I think it's a patent right now on how to reduce the load on the plant, the entire Bitcoin mining facility, for example. So if there's a spike in price, or the electrical company needs more power, they can send a signal, and it automatically shuts down a certain amount of megawatts per facility. And then we've been doing that quite successfully at a couple of our sites, and it'd be useful for everyone to be able to use that in order to work with the community. So
Most definitely. Most definitely. So you just said this, right? That, you're essentially like a bank of virtual currency. Right. I'm curious, what does Bitmain do with the Bitcoins it mines? Do you sell that into the market? Do you store it and keep it yourself? What happens with the Bitcoins that are mined by Bitmain
right.
or currency?
Well, yeah, that's an answer for our finance department, but uh, what I mean, it depends on the site.
And by the way, in a 30,000 foot view, right? Not like,
Yeah.
I,
Oh, right.
I,
Absolutely. Well, one of our services that we also have is called BitDeer. And it's like, I think if you just Google BitDear, BITDER, basically we created a software that will sell the terahashes by terahash per hour. Um, and so what that does, it allows people to cloud mine that can't afford opening facilities. Everyone can partake in the mining facility. We take care of all the setup, the maintenance and whatnot, and then really someone just needs to invest in it. And what that does is it lets democratizes who can do it, not just the big players anymore. I mean, it used to start out, people in their basements, and then things got more expensive and more power got used up, and then now, you can still participate. And I think Farood, who you had on your show quite a bit, and he's doing the same idea. It basically brings it to the people, to the to the public, to be able to participate at any scale that they want, whether small or big. So similar to that. Yeah.
yeah,
What do we do with the coins? I mean, that's up to the finance department. Um, but what we also do is quite a bit of AI research. So not everything is completely dedicated to just mining. Um, and so there you go. So that's the answer for that.
yeah, yeah. How does the AI research play into it? Is it like broader than cryptocurrency from on the AI sort of thing?
Or AI research. So something like that.
Got it. Just because they're the
Yeah,
processing power and so forth that they have, it's
right. And
basically have these
the scalability.
supercomputers,
And it's
right?
quite. I mean, we are the most successful at making these chips at an affordable price, which is why we're the market leader still.
Yeah. Let's talk about that on the hardware side of things, right? So like, yeah, you are a hardware, manufacturer, and you use your own hardware to mine, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And then and we were talking about a moment ago about how, like there's perhaps like a life cycle of 2 to 3 years or so on these machines. Um, what do you guys do when you're done with that? Do you sell them into the market? Do they just go to the recycling bin? What's kind of like that process of how you decide what when you're going to introduce uh, new hardware that you've designed, and then do you then bring that back out to others, or how does that work?
Right. I mean, it's completely well. Just to put it in perspective, our mining operation is not as large of a revenue share as selling these machines. So, and mostly what we're doing is, proof of concept, because we want as many people to mine as much as possible, because that's how the company makes money as well.
Yeah.
And it derives that revenue to do more research and become more cutting edge on the blockchain side as well as the manufacturing side. So, um, yeah, I mean, how do we decide what happens? Uh, so to give you an idea, last year, at the end of last year, I mean, the mining machines were sold out uh, for 3 or 4 months in advance. So that means even the mining sites, we weren't able to get enough machines to fill them because the demand for for our mining machines have been going off, have been astronomical. So um, we kind of replace the existing miners when there's excess, and we haven't done that for a little bit. We did start doing it a little bit in January for a couple sites, but really, I mean, it's case by case basis.
Got it.
So to give you an idea, if you got an S17 today, and I guess I'm getting to the profitability side, and depending on what
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
spending for, um, per cost per kilowatt hour. Let's say you're going from 3 cents, then your cost for mining a Bitcoin is about $2,000. And then if you are paying, closer to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, you're probably going to spend about $3,300 to mine one Bitcoin. Um, so, and the price of Bitcoin 7,100 right now. That's still quite profitable, but of course, we're not including all the amortization costs, but just pure running costs. It's still very profitable to be mining right now, and even after the happening.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And that, so is that when you're talking through those numbers, are you talking through like one S17? If one S17 is to mine one Bitcoin, or to mine one Bitcoin, it would cost the $3,000 of basically from an electricity standpoint, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that's
Like,
your electricity, pure electricity costs.
got it. Got it. And then just curious,
Daily.
how much are those machines, the S17s,
Oh,
roughly?
I haven't checked the price lately. I guess I could look it up real quick,
Or
but
ballpark even. I won't, no one will hold you to it, but are they like thousands of dollars, a couple thousand? Or is it like,
well, they used to be a lot more, but I think today, I mean, it used to be 3,000. Okay, so S17, 70 terahashes online, and this is, this year it's $1,600.
okay, got it. Got it.
This one includes the PSU, which is the power supply unit. Previous old generations, you had to buy the PSU separately. So this is more advanced and more efficient, certainly.
Got it. So at the S17, does that allow a consumer to get into mining? So could a consumer buy an S17 essentially, plug it into the wall, assuming they have, power at 3 cents? And then, yeah, that's then, so basically, so if it's like $2,000 to $3,000 that it costs, let's use, we're just using napkin math right now, of course, right? So if it's like $3,000 essentially to mine Bitcoin in electricity cost, with the S17, plus you're in, so basically you're in it for like 4,600 bucks or so, and then you're still profitable. Got it.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
and so that, and that's the business essentially, is that you're doing that, right?
Right. I mean, you have to take a look at it as if it's manufacturing. It's the same thing. You're creating something, out of nothing, or in this case, electricity.
Yeah.
Um, that is virtual for that. So yeah, yeah, that's what you're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah. And when so when Bitcoin like goes up or down, not to talk on the price aspects of things, but when Bitcoin goes up and down, so like we have like these big price swings. So we were at like 10,000 a few weeks ago. We went down to 5,000, and now we're like about 7,000 or so.
Right.
So does what happens to mining at 10,000 versus 5,000? Like what does Bitmain, or like what does a Bitcoin miner or someone in that space think about, like at Bitcoin at 10 versus Bitcoin at 5 from a
Right.
mining perspective?
Very good question. So typically what happens when the price goes down so low, people end up, well, those who are, let's say you're spending 10 cents a kilowatt hour, you double this, now you're at $6,000. What it costs to mine a Bitcoin, $6,000, but then a Bitcoin, is currently at $5,000. What'll happen is those guys will turn off their machines. And what that'll do is actually that'll decrease the difficulty rating, and people who are on the cheaper side of electricity can still mine at a profitable rate. You'll just end up getting more coins. Let's exclude what the exchanges are talking, $7,200. One Bitcoin is equal to one Bitcoin.
Okay.
So you'll just end up mining more, when more people turn their machines off. And then, we saw that happen in early 2018, during the crypto winter when, price hit $3,000. So what it comes down to is, how efficient your operation is, what can you cost, because it's a manufacturing process. So the same
Right.
idea. Yeah.
So basically at that point, so yeah, right. So if one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin and you're mining at 3,000, it might cost you more dollars at that point to mine it. But because one Bitcoin is more one Bitcoin, you're getting more Bitcoin. So
Right.
that when if you're mining for the reasons that usually people are, is because either to hold or wealth or whatever, then,
Right.
that Bitcoin in theory will increase in value. Got it. Makes
Right.
sense.
Right. Yeah,
Makes
and
sense.
the big banks right now are creating investment vehicles, pending some obviously some regulations, but they're gearing up to create investment vehicles for people to invest into Bitcoin
Hmm.
or cryptocurrencies for that matter. And what's important is they want to have a coin that has no history or any questionable history. So the only way to do that is to get freshly minted coins that are coming out of a mining facility with basically no history. And so that will help the customers of the banks able to get something that's from clean, fresh record, if that's the case, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. So, I'd love to kind of bring this whole conversation into like where the world is today, right? So, we talked about this a little bit ago as far as with, the price of Bitcoin going down and how that affects. But what about like global impact or global markets, right? So, when governments are saying things like, "Hey, you have to stay in place," or if there's things that are happening in the world overall, or just the stock market is down, like are those things that impact mining? Just I guess because you talked about like economic and global factors. Does the stock market affect, like, does stock market price being down affect Bitcoin mining at all? Is there any correlation there, or is it just strictly Bitcoin price is usually all that matters?
Um, Bitcoin price is strictly all that matters.
Yeah,
I mean, to build an operation, you're planning a year and a half in advance, 2 years. And so if the market tanks by then, it's already almost too late because you've already invested so much capital for
got it.
the investment. So um, I don't believe that if the stock market is down, in fact, it might be the opposite. Typically precious metals and commodities go up when the stock market is down. It's kind of like an inverse reaction.
Hmm.
And when we saw there is, potential, a downturn in economy, Bitcoin shoots up. Um, the thing is, Bitcoin just so amazing. We're still learning on how it affects people's mentality, but one thing can be sure is that you will have a dramatic movement. And volatility is sometimes good and bad.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and then when people start talking about things like hash power, that's directly related to like people mining, right? So like that would be, I guess, essentially based off our conversation here, is depending on the price and how many people are mining is really what's going to determine that hash power. Is that a fair? way to
That's
think of it?
part of it. Back in 2017, the end of 2017, when there were maybe a huge factor, I forgot what it was, but there was a lot of transactions going on. The more transactions that are happening with, in the crypto space or Bitcoin, that also increases the price. I mean, people have to remember that mining is a portion of why we're turning these machines on. The other part of it is, we're securing the ledger. Similar to how a bank, has a server, and they charge you, a wiring fee, $20 to send money to somebody else. If you're sending Bitcoin to somebody else, the machine or the server that records that transaction also gets to partake in that transaction. Of course, the fees are much less than $20 to, transfer money for one person to another or one wallet to another. But after mining goes away, once the rewards depreciate, if we have, an ecosystem where Bitcoin is transacted a lot more, that's how these machines will be making money in sense. So, it's the same idea as how a bank turns on a server and they have a system. Each one of these servers will get paid every time someone moves money from one person to the other, and that's how it gets securitized. It's
Hmm.
democratization of a banking system, essentially.
Yeah, no, that's a super interesting way to look at it too. Yeah, just letting the computers decide, or not decide, but the it's letting the algorithm, I guess, decide, right? The math.
Right. It's a demand, right? So the more demand for, you want your transaction to go faster, the more it's going to cost. And if you're not in a rush, your transaction needs to be low priority. You set it at that, and then the cost to transact becomes lower. So same idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What do you think happens uh, from a mining difficulty standpoint? So the halvening is happening about 30 days from now,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Give or take. And so we know that the mining difficulty becomes harder. But what does that actually mean? So people say all the time, hey, like mining is going to be harder, mining rewards are going to be cut in half. But what does that technically mean?
Well, that's exactly. It's going to be cutting half. So the algorithm sets it up so that at certain points of mining, when the block hits a number of blocks pass through, then the mining rewards are halved because the original creator really just wanted people to start using the system, and he expected by the time it hits this many blocks completed, then the system will be more mature, and we're going to be have an ecosystem where it's just transactional based instead of mining based. So what's going to happen in the next near future is the halvening, which everyone's talking about. Traditionally, every time a halvening has happened, the price has increased. But as history knows, that history has no patterns. It's correct up until the point that it's not. So we won't know what happens. But I'm very optimistic that this system will still be available because the same idea. If the price of Bitcoin goes down, essentially, this is cutting it in half of what your mining rewards are. People have to calculate, can they get the most sophisticated machines on the market? What Bitmain, produces, like the S19 that's coming out, and that will make them profitable again.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, I think the price might go up, it might not go up, who knows? But I know for sure that this will still be around. And what ended up happening is we need to create more high tech and cutting edge technology that can make it more profitable.
Yeah. And so if the mining reward goes down, does that also mean, do you think that in turn means that there will be less people mining, or just the same amount of people mining, fighting over half the rewards? Like, does this weed out a set of people or a set of companies as a result of it? Because maybe they
Absolutely.
can't. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes down to how efficient you run your operation. What's your electricity costs, your build costs, what you're going to amortize, and obviously, with any industry, websites were, first built out by guys, living in their basement or living on GeoCities. Yeah, and then after that, the professionals got in, and you have these large websites that take 100-man team to manage, for example, e-commerce websites, whatnot. And so the same idea, the professionals are getting into the game for the last few years here. And so if your scalability is affordable, let's say, you're on the low scale of construction per megawatt, you can survive, certainly. And that's what the market, demands. It always looks for more efficiencies and effectiveness in the market.
Yeah, yeah. And I know, there's lots of banks getting into it, like banks themselves that are getting involved with mining, like Fidelity and things like that. Why do you think it becomes interesting for them? Is it a financial thing? Is that mainly that? What do you think becomes interesting when you see banks wanting to partner or get involved in the space?
I think that's great. I mean, they're also, old school professionals. And then if they take over this as well, it changes, the whole dynamics of how efficient can you run a mining operation. So if they get in on this, which they are, I think it's gonna be great for the system because it streamlines it and makes it more efficient in order to get these machines out and running and the operation going. Um, yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. We are partnering with a lot of firms out there who are opening mines or want coins minted. But one thing we also want to keep going is the people, the public to be able to participate. And some of that is through BitDeer. Maybe someone wants to buy an S17, hook it up to their home. S19s are coming up. If you want an extra heater, those things are great too. But obviously, you have to check with the local regulations because some don't allow it. But otherwise, I think it's great where the direction we're heading.
Yeah, yeah, no, super interesting. Yeah, I'm fascinated by all the companies, banks, firms getting into it. I think obviously that adds another layer of validity to the space and proves it out a little bit more. Um, so I love kind of to, I guess, put it back on you, and it's like what kind of questions do you have when you're thinking through this, like, and they can be even rhetorical, but like what do you think about on a daily when you're going about your day with Bitmain, or what are kind of like those next things that get you going, what keeps you up, or where are we headed in this space on the mining front?
Well, I got to say, and a compliment to Bitmain. I have loved working for this company. They've been very supportive, of my team, and the systems that the teams have over in China have been very sophisticated, and I've learned a lot. And they've helped me make my job easier, which is great because we get to go into a community that is generally could be mostly rural and provide jobs and benefits and opportunities and learning. Some of these, communities don't even have, let's say a computer science or somewhere to program or something with data and IT. But by us going in there, we've been training people in the community to give them more skills so that they're, more attractive to other companies for coming in the area because they see the workforce grow. So where do I see this going? I mean, Bitmain is it's a big company and we're expanding very rapidly in North America. And what I'm going to say is that I look forward to what we can do together, and very very grateful for what they've done and how much they've advanced this whole space, in
Yeah,
blockchain. So
yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. That's really good. It's definitely, I've seen a lot of growth over the last few years, especially. Um, you brought up a couple of things made me think. So, so Bitmain does have a huge presence in China overall. How does that business run comparatively to the U.S. in the sense of, is it the same? Is it basically the same? Meaning, like, you have your infrastructure in place, and you have your data centers essentially, just different location. Is it any different than you would operate it here in the U.S.?
yeah, well, I mean, a majority of our focus is in the research, development, and manufacturing. And so, as far as manufacturing is concerned, that's probably our one of our main focuses. And so, I mean, once again, the mining sites, they're all over the world. We've set up mining sites all over the world. Um, but is it different? Every site is different.
Yeah.
Every site you have
Yeah.
to deal with local regulations and whatever OSHA safety regulations that are needed. Um, but all in all, I mean, it's what's great is when we go in, we definitely raise the profile of that community. Either by new jobs or property tax increases or things like that, or bringing tech to a new area. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. Super interesting. Well, Raymond, hey, this has been a fun conversation. I really appreciate the time. I love to, hopefully we get to see each other again soon, not on video.
Yeah.
But yeah, what any last words for anybody? We kind of said that a second ago, but um, what are the best ways to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I guess you could also check out the Bitmain website. Is probably the easiest. And thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you again. And yeah, hopefully we do get to talk soon. Once everything's settled down.
Yeah,
Uh,
when does the S19 come out?
that's to be determined.
Okay,
But it has been announced that that new technology is ready, and I think our manufacturing has been gearing up for that. So yeah,
cool.
great.
Cool, cool. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Raymond, thank you so much again for everybody watching and listening. Thank you for listening to another episode of the TF Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at TF Blockchain or me at JG Product. And please make sure that you are subscribed on the podcast medium that you're listening to this right now and on YouTube as well. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much.